Welcome. The time is now 6:02. The Governance and Policy Committee meeting of Wednesday, December 11th, 2024 will now come to order. Trustees are reminded that as this is a committee, it is the appropriate place for discussion of agenda items before they proceed to the board as applicable. Following presentation of each report, discussion will be open for trustees. We'll now have our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, I'd like to now move to the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Trustee Dracula. May I have a motion to approve? Sorry, that has been moved. The agenda has approved. May I please have a motion to approve the draft minutes of the Governance and Policy Committee meeting of October 30th, 2024. Thank you, Trustee Brown. All in favor? Thank you. The minutes are approved. At this time, we have some recommended actions coming forward. I'd now like to call on General Counsel Patrick Cotter to do the first recommended item, and that is on page 4 to 21 of your agenda package.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair Miller. So this report is brought forward to seek the committee's approval of proposed changes to the complaint protocol that is attached to the board's code of conduct. These changes are made necessary to ensure that the board is in compliance with legislative changes that came into force in July 2024.
Can I just ask for a recess for 1 minute as we fix some technical issues? Thank you.
for the chair to be, or the director to be engaged in those processes. You could get, a community group submit 50 complaints, and they all would have to be treated as same as a member complaint. So at least with engaging the integrity commissioner to vet those complaints, anything that has a serious concern of breach, the integrity commissioner will bring forward, and the members can then decide, yes, we agree, this should go forward. So I think those are the two caveats I would say. One is I'm not sure the board has the jurisdiction to do that. Under the legislation, I would suggest that the members have a right not to be subject to the process unless another member of the board brings it forward. And that's sort of a protection that's available to all the members. And secondly, there's a real risk that frivolous and abusive claims take up a lot of time of the chair and the members that would otherwise be dealt with under the proposed process by the integrity commissioner without taking up the time and energy of the chair and the member.
Thank you, Council Cutter. I'm going to move to the next person. That's Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. After that explanation, I somewhat can understand the flow chart, and just my comment is that from the public's perspective, there was too much explanation that it needed. So this flow chart, even with the protocols, there needs to be an accompanied flow chart to actually show in user-friendly language how this is to work. And agree that when, comes to our discussions around the changes, that the one piece that we have as different that isn't under the legislation is the fact that we have a member complaint. I also sort of recognize that we have a responsibility to address complaints. That is definitely under the education that requires in complaints. We have a responsibility to address them as far as that is concerned. So if we're, and because there's really a two-stage process before we get a report, not because there's two parts where he does a threshold assessment according to the thing, and the second one is where he does the sort of a preliminary discussion with the complainant and so forth to get more information, and based on that is whether he makes a report to the basically a report to the board saying that he feels that there is there's just cause for this complaint, and then that's when a member can. So as far as the responsibility, I think it's very much covered under the Act that we can then say that this is the way it goes, and we can send it, the notice, basically the complaint goes to the chair, then it automatically would go to the IC because of the fact that it's already gone through that route. I don't see the so I really don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem where it talks about we have an informal process, and nowhere into the discussion that it outlines sort of is clear what part is informal and what part isn't. I do understand the process, but it doesn't really clear that up for the complainant or even from a member or a non-member.
Council Cutter would like to respond.
Thank you. So thank you for the comments, Trustee Edwards. So in terms of the flow chart, that was, the intention there was to provide that as an aid just to the members of this committee so they can hopefully have a better understanding of the general flow. But what I might suggest is that the committee focus on the language in the Code of Conduct, and I'm happy to come back at the direction of the committee with a flow chart that we could work on as a committee and post, either make part of the code or at least post on the website for the public that could address some of the concerns that Trustee Edwards has raised. So that's my suggestion, that the compliance piece would be met as long as we have the revised language, and that we can deal with the flow chart Separately, and the committee can work on that, and I'm happy to provide a first draft for our next meeting in January, so that's what I would suggest there. Oh, sorry, Trustee Edwards, you had another question there about formal and informal. So there isn't really a separate stream, whether it's formal or informal. It is one process that that flows once the notice is provided under 4.2.1. Then under 4.2.3, there is a 20 business day time frame to try to resolve the complaint. We've left that intentionally open-ended so that if there's a need for an external mediator in a complex situation, the director can retain an external mediator or an external investigator to help the parties resolve that. It's really going to be up to the chair and the member that's complaining to sort of frame that process out as to what might make sense depending on the circumstances. So that's just part of the timeline. This is all part of a formal process. Let's say it's all part of a formal process, but it includes a mediation window of 20 business days. If it doesn't resolve, then it just goes to the next stage and the investigation is commenced. So I don't really view it as a formal or informal process. It's one formal process from the start of 4.2 that includes a mediation window of 20 days, as set out in 4.2.3.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter. I'm now moved to Trustee Piniello.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you for preparing this report, and in particular the flow chart, because I do love a good flow chart. I think I want to address what I know is going to likely be an area of public contention in this process, in the revised process. So after a member of the public sends a request to the Integrity Commissioner, if it is at least substantiated enough for the Integrity Commissioner to report back to the board, I think we have to be prepared for, if we at that point choose to not proceed, that there is going to be perhaps some pushback about trustees policing themselves. And so I'm very cognizant of that, because if this was another system or entity, I would perhaps raise concerns about the same thing, that you're enabling, you know, a system or a body within a system to essentially direct and police themselves, particularly when it's a complaint about another member of this board. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to occur, but I do think it's worth mentioning because I can imagine it's going to be raised and we're going to hear about it. I understand that the new legislation gives very specific parameters around this, and so perhaps this is something that we just keep in the back of our minds at a provincial level to continue to inquire about or address if we do get comments about it, so that it doesn't seem as though we are trying to give ourselves more power in this process than what is perceived that we should have, particularly when it's a code of conduct complaint. I acknowledge that an Integrity Commissioner is probably not going to refer something frivolous, as we know, to the board. But if a complaint that was at least somewhat substantiated dies at the board level, I just think we have to be prepared to make those decisions and defend those decisions as a board collectively, even before they happen, even before these changes are enacted. So I raise that. I think it's important, as was said before, that members of the public can still complain. They still have an avenue to do that. That isn't necessarily to directly the trustees, because I think it gives that process of removal and allows them in some cases to remain anonymous or unnamed if that is safer for them, because I'm also cognizant that there are safety concerns aligned with some of the complaints that have and I'm sure will arise. But I wanted to at least flag that for consideration while we are moving forward with any new process, just so that we're mindful. Otherwise, I appreciate the expansion on the informal because I was also going to ask what that entails and if it's going to be tailored to the situation and to the scenario or if it also has a standardized, but my question has been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Pinello. I'll move to Trustee Cunningham.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you, Council Cotter, for the explanation, and to Trustee Pinello for explaining what I was feeling, but in much better words. I have a couple of really quick clarifying questions. Because they're really short, I'm just going to say them, and you can cut me off if I'm asking too many. But one is there's a 90-day sanction. Is that per breach? So if someone is told they broke the code 3 times, is that 190 days for all 3, or can there be consecutive sanctions? I want to know, it says the sanction can involve removing a trustee from a position. What positions are there? Do we mean like the chair or vice chair or something? And lastly, it says that the board will pay costs of up to $5,000, and I'm wondering what costs those can be.
Thank you for the questions, and through you, Chair. So these are the sanctions in section 4.4.1. This wording is pulled directly from the legislative changes, and the 90-day period, will be subject to interpretation by integrity commissioners across the province, and may ultimately end up before the divisional court for clarification on that question. I think it's premature for me to answer it, nor does my opinion matter. The integrity commissioners will decide that, and ultimately at some point it'll end up before the divisional court, and they'll interpret the language, which is straight from the legislation, in terms of whether that's per offense or per report. So I know that's not very satisfactory, but I think that's the lay of the land until we get some integrity commissioners interpreting it and applying it. The third question on the fees, you're going to have to tell me what section that is. I don't see it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm calling on you. That's okay. Go ahead.
I will have to get back to you on that because I wrote the note down and it is not right on top of but it says in there that for legal fees, the board will pay up to $5,000 for a trustee on a code of conduct complaint. Now, is that like an appeals process? I don't understand where that is. I'm trying to find the exact number for you, but I may have to come back to you on that.
So, if I may, and through you, Chair Miller, so my guess is that you're looking at the previous complaint protocol, where we did include terms covering legal fees in certain circumstances if the matter went, 4.7 of the old complaint protocol included provision for certain fees, and including if there was a judicial review to the divisional court. That is no longer included, and the section 4.5 of the new complaint protocol does include a right of an appeal. That's a more streamlined process. That would therefore, I think it alleviates the need prior, which was through divisional court, which may be expensive. So that was sort of the rationale there. And I'm sorry, your second, you went too quickly on your second question.
Apologies, and through you, Chair, again, the question was that it says one of the sanctions can remove a trustee from a position, and I just wanted to get clarity on what a position means. Does that mean like a vice chair or chair role? Correct.
Thank you. That would, yeah, I think in that situation, it would not be from the seat, that would be from the position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Cutter. Is there any further questions? We have Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. So to clarify, as this process is concerned, I would like to see the first paragraph of 4.0 changed so that the complaint protocol describes the process for addressing breaches of code of conduct. Because if you're saying there's one and there's no formal or really the informal part is really that section, then I think that we should eliminate the fact that there is an informal process, even though it's just part of the whole process from that perspective. And then I do agree about the chart, though, because it has to be user-friendly, coming back to the committee to work on the chart. But that's my suggestion, is to remove, it says to the words informal, just to a process for addressing alleged allegations of breach of code of conduct.
So just for the purposes of the recording secretary, so it would, Trustee Edwards' proposed amendment would be the complaint protocol describes the process for addressing. And those other additional words would be deleted. So you have a motion, Chair Miller, on the floor. I mean, moved, not on the floor yet.
Can I have a mover for the motion to amend Complaint Protocol 4.0? Thank you, Trustee Arsenault. Is there any further comments? Okay, so now we will have discussion on the current amendment on the floor. Is there any questions or comments? I recognize Trustee Thatcher. Again, this is just for the amendment on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I had a clarifying question. I was going to be asking it, so I'm not addressing the issue that you're asking for at the moment. I'll come back to my question.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Again, the motion to amend, there's amendment to motion to amend Complaint Protocol 4.0. If there is any discussion or question on the motion on the table. Seeing none, can we have a vote? I'm going to call the vote to approve the amendment for the Complaint Protocol 4.0. Can I see hands raised or the cards for approving the motion, the amendment to the motion? Thank you. That motion is carried. Okay, thank you so much. We are now back to the main motion. Are there any comments or further questions on the motion? And I will ask those that have not spoken as yet. I recognize Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, Chair. My question, my question is around section 4.6.2. I just wanted a little clarification around that. It talks about where the alleged breach of the code of conduct involves any of the matters described in clauses 207.2, A to E of the Ed Act. The board shall publish any such information, only that which is appropriate. So I just wondered if we could have a little clarification around that. Section 207 and what that exactly means.
Sure, thank you very much. And through you, Chair Miller. So as you'll note in 4.6.1, there's a number of documents and materials that must be made public, including a summary of the matter referred to the Integrity Commissioner and a summary of the decisions and determinations of the Integrity Commissioner and determination of any appeals. So that's all, whatever's in those documents is going to be public. However, some complaints of a breach of a code of conduct relate to what happens in camera in a closed session meeting. So there may be discussions that must remain confidential and in camera. And section 207 there is what allows the committee of the whole to meet in closed session. So in other words, if the committee meets in closed section under section 207 to A to E, those are the standard categories that we often refer to: personal information regarding a staff member or member of the community, et cetera, et cetera. So if any of those clauses are engaged, if any of the information referenced in the reports in 4.6.1 would qualify under section 207.2, and were matters that were discussed in camera, then those would be redacted from what gets published on 4.6.1. This mirrors what we already have in our code, which is that sort of the end result being that a code of conduct investigation and report is not licensed to publish materials and discussions that are properly in camera. That will remain closed.
Thank you, Council Cotter. I'll now turn to Trustee Pinello.
Thank you, Chair, through you. My question is for Council Cotter. I'm looking at 4.1.1, and ultimately my question is going to be, is this language that is clearly laid out in legislation, or is this language that we have created? And I'm asking because it says, under allegations of breach by non-members, a DDSB community member, i.e. staff, parent, guardian of a minor DDSB student, or a DDSB student that is at least 18 years of age may bring forward the alleged breach. But I also note that many of us were elected by community members that are not part or would not necessarily fall into either a staff, a student, or a parent guardian of a minor student at this point. So I'm wondering if that language is legislation or if it's our interpretation, because I do worry about accountability from the perspective of that means that there's a whole group of people who can't complain if they experience or witness an alleged breach, but have also simultaneously elected us into these positions. Like, that raises concerns for me. So if you could just clarify whether that's provincial or us. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Miller. So the right of a community member to come forward is strictly a creation of this board. Nothing in the statute about it, and relatedly, no definition of community member who could come forward. So this is my drafting for your consideration. The committee may decide that community member is too broad and should only be parents and shouldn't be staff, or, as your comment alludes, could decide that it's anybody that resides within the region covered by the Durham District School Board. So you're free as a committee to broaden it or narrow it as you see fit, or to get rid of it completely and say non-members cannot come forward. So it's totally within the discretion of the committee.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Is there any further questions before we call the question? Trustee Pinello?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you, Council Cotter. I am sitting with that a little bit because I think that deserves some attention from trustees. Like, if we are going to effectively cut out any and all community members who don't fit within these three parameters, I think we have to be really intentional about that. And I wonder if maybe we spend a little bit of time discussing, because that's a big change. And personally, I don't think it's something I necessarily feel comfortable with. So I'm happy to move an amendment to start the debate, but I guess I was happy to open it up and hear what other trustees had to say, because if that is the direction we're going in, then we have to say that with our whole chest. And I am not confident at this moment that I know how other trustees are thinking and feeling about eliminating probably a large section of their voter base from the ability to hold them or others to account. So at your discretion, Chair, I'm happy to move it to have that conversation, but I would much rather maybe just hear feedback from trustees.
Okay, my decision right now is to continue the discussion before we make any decisions, and we have Trustee Linton who has not spoken, and I will go to him first. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think Trustee Penello's point is a good one, because when we're looking at Section 4.1.1 and those who don't fall into that category, I do think of community advocates who are there to support the community and community members. I think about, again, a pretty significant newcomer base who may need that support if they feel that they're not being represented appropriately. So I do believe, again, one, up for discussion, but two, even discussing expanding that definition of what a member is and who a member is, to be more inclusive of the Durham community at large.
Thank you, Stephen. I will take comment from Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm rereading and agreeing with what's been said. I am wondering, would it be a possibility, I mean, the issue is that in brackets it says IE, so IE to me means for example. Is it that we haven't exhausted all the examples, which then would include everyone, or is it almost redundant that maybe that should be all taken out and just a community member may bring forward an alleged breach of the Code of Conduct by submitting to the Integrity Commissioner? That just rings better. I think it's because there was examples given, and that's where I feel that people will feel that, well, I'm not this, so I can't, even though it says IE, for example. So I would just take it out personally, and if you need me to redo that and to say it again so it becomes a motion, I can do that too. But I feel that that's just an amendment rather than a whole motion. But I'll leave it to the discretion of the Chair.
Trustee Brown, are you making a motion to amend the amended motion?
Yes, I can do that.
So if I may, Chair Miller, just to clarify then, I think the amendment would be to 4.1.1 that would now read a DDSB community, no, maybe we don't even need, yeah, okay, a DDSB community member being anyone residing within the jurisdiction covered by the Durham District School Board may bring forward.
Can I respond?
Yes, of course. That was,
Okay,
that was suggested wording. It's
Suggestion.
your motion.
Okay, and I would actually take it back further where it just is, just take everything out the bracket and just a DDSB community member may bring forward an alleged breach code of conduct, and don't give examples. So I don't feel like the examples is, I feel like the examples is the problem. And I also have an issue with DDSB community member, because I also feel it should just be a community member. Okay, let me start again. Bear with me. So I'm thinking this in my head as we go along. So a community member may bring forward an alleged breach of the Code of Conduct by submitting to the Integrity Commissioner a properly completed copy of an inquiry request form located on the DDSB website.
May I make a suggestion? Trustee Brown, for your consideration. What if it just said a person, because I do think you want them to live in Durham. So a person residing within the jurisdiction of the Durham District School Board may bring forward. Because then if you start saying a community member, like, what is that, right? To your point. So I just think a person residing within the jurisdiction of the Durham District School Board may bring forward.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Yes, that's what I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have a motion on the floor.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Just wondering if our secretary has caught that. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, the amended motion, which, could I have that on the screen if possible? Okay, we may not need to. So the recommendations were to change the wording to a person residing in the Durham jurisdiction to cover the previous terms in section 4.1. So can I have a discussion on that? Now the motion is on the table. Can I have a discussion or any questions? Again, this is on the current motion. Oops, and I will be taking Trustee Piniello.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I don't disagree with the wording. I think the only thing I want to flag is a DDSB staff member who works within the region but does not necessarily live within the region may be precluded from this. So I'm wondering if we add a component that allows the Integrity Commissioner discretion based on the appropriateness of the complaint, since this would go to them first, if I'm understanding correctly. Just because if you are a staff who doesn't live here but works here and you raise a concern, you're not necessarily captured in that resident of Durham region piece. And I know that that has come to me at least once before with a staff who's out of district with a concern that they wanted to address or a question. But yeah, I wonder if there's alternative, if we do specify, or any staff member of the Durham District School Board, if that's easier. I just want to make sure we're not precluding anybody who's connected but maybe doesn't live here from that opportunity.
Through you, Chair Miller, thank you for your comments. I mean, my suggestion, Trustee Piniello, would be to define it. If it's any staff, just say we can just add to 4.1.1 and any DDSB staff member, rather than leaving it to discretion. The committee should decide the scope on this. So if that's the intention, I would suggest just adding that language to 4.1.1. So, Recording Secretary, are we having any progress on getting it up on the board? Because maybe we can then, I can make a suggestion, Trustee Piniello, then you could move.
Thank you, Council Cotter. While we wait, I will take Trustee Dracula.
Thank you. I was just going to support what was mentioned, that it be somebody who lives in the Durham region, because you don't want to get it too far outside. And I think the suggestion that's just coming now to add a staff member is probably going to be almost as exclusive it can get, and that will be perfect. I hesitate to use that word, but perfect for what our needs are, as long as it's somebody, whether it's a staff member or employed by the DDSB. I don't know what the proper terminology would be that way, but as long as the umbrella term has essentially a resident of Durham or somebody who works for the DDSB, I think that probably captures everything that we're trying to achieve.
So if I may, and through you, Chair Miller, now that we have it up on the board, maybe I think my suggestion will be we change a person to any person. And then I think it goes better when we add any person residing within the jurisdiction of the Durham District School Board and any DDSB staff member may. So I think that works. Trustee Piniello, does that accord with your wishes, and will you move that?
Okay, so moved. I'll now take Trustee Linton's question or comment.
Sorry, I am going to add a layer of complexity to this because I don't think that covers a student of DDSB who is in a, for lack of a better term, a split household where either parent or guardian does not reside within DDSB but would have concerns and would want to advocate for their child. So let me know if I didn't explain that. Just my thought is someone lives with one parent in Durham, but the other parent lives in Markham. But they still have a vested interest in the well-being of their child who does attend the DDSB school. So would that preclude them being able to submit a complaint?
Sorry, Stephen, Trustee Linton, can you please just clarify your question? Because it was first a suggestion and now I hear a question. Can you please just clarify your question?
Yeah, so maybe it's a comment, just because I think we're trying to ensure that a member who can submit a complaint has a vested interest, one, in the region of Durham, and two, in, the outcomes or, the plans of the board. So my thought is, if it is a parent whose child attends a Durham District School Board, but they reside outside of Durham.
Thank you, Trustee Linton.
So I think the director may have to comment on that, but I think it is possible, as you say, Trustee Linton, to have a parent that does not reside in the jurisdiction, but obviously one parent does, and the child attends the district. So if the if that's a motion you're making, I'm happy to help with suggested language. If the recording secretary can put it up, can I?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Recording secretary, if you want to put it up, I can add some proposed language, unless Trustee Brown has language.
Okay, Trustee Brown has a comment. I'll turn to you, Trustee Brown.
Okay, thank you, and through you, Chair. Just for clarification, my understanding is that you have to be 18 or over to file a complaint. Am I correct? So before we take this any further, because I'm making the assumption Trustee Linton is saying if the student would like to make the complaint, or is it the parent?
The parent.
Okay, sorry. I apologize. Go.
But I think it's a fair point that we should probably, the committee should probably clarify. So, recording secretary, are you able to put that? Oh, wow, fast. Just let me read it for a minute here. So if it said any person at least 18 years of age residing within the jurisdiction of the Durham District School Board, or who is a parent or guardian of a pupil of the Durham District School Board. Yeah, that's correct. Maybe, I don't know if we need a semicolon after DDSB. There, yeah, cool, there we go. So now it would say any person at least 18 years of age residing within the jurisdiction of the board, or who is a parent of a guardian or of a pupil of the Durham District School Board. Yeah, that's good, I think. You had somebody had a comment? That's what I have, a pupil. But they would be, so a pupil, as long as you're 18 years of age within the district, you can complain. So if you're a pupil, you're saying if you're a pupil that lives out of the district? That's okay. That's okay, be fully covered off. Okay, so any person at least 18 years of age residing or who is a pupil, so third line, or who is, a pupil or parent / guardian. Get rid of the or there's parent / guardian. Yeah, I think that covers it now. Sorry, let me just read it again. So it now says, any person at least 18 years of age residing within the jurisdiction of the Durham District School Board, or who is a pupil or parent of a pupil of the Durham District School Board, or any Durham District School Board staff member. Yeah, okay, that's fine. She changed it, yeah, thanks.
Turn over to Trustee Edwards for comment.
Thank you. I'm glad that it's up on there because, and it says the Durham District School Board because of the fact that we don't want to, because somebody had mentioned Durham Region, and Durham District School Board doesn't include Clarington, which is part of Durham Region. So I'm glad it says board because we don't want, unless they're a parent of a pupil, or a pupil that resides in Clarington that are part of the board, then that, yes, but if they're any other resident, they are not part of the Durham District School Board. So I'm glad that it reflects that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Okay, we've had a fulsome discussion and a few changes. I would like to now call the vote for all in favor, showing your cards or hands of this amendment. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we are back to the main motion, and I'm just calling for any final points or clarification on the main motion. Trustee Edwards.
Just a point of clarification when it comes to the flow chart. I think it's, I have no problem going with what we have, but I think that whether I really, as far as process, Madam Chair, whether we want to basically have a motion to come back to a future meeting to work on a flow chart that will accompany this protocol, because I think it's important to document it so that we have a user-friendly flow chart that will help people go through this process.
If I might, Chair Miller, I might have a suggestion. I think given the fact that the changes come into force on January 1st, my suggestion would be that the committee pass the amended complaint protocol without expressly linking it to the flow chart, so that there be one motion on that, and that there be a separate motion that that staff will return with a draft flow chart that would be posted along with the complaint protocol on the board's website. And then, so then when we come back at the next meeting, committee can amend the flow chart as it deems appropriate and then pass a motion directing staff to post it along with the, so that what I'm suggesting, I guess, is that the direction that it be linked, not come now, but come when it's ready to go. And that way it doesn't hold up the enforceability or the completeness of the complaint protocol.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none. Okay, we'd like to call the vote. May I see? Thank you, that motion is carried. Okay, now we are to Donna's motion with the current suggestions. Donna, are you ready to put forward your motion?
Yes, for the motion is for staff to basically return to the next government's meeting with a draft flow chart that would be posted with the protocol after the fact, basically with the protocol for ease of use and its transparency for our parents.
All in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. Okay, so now we are on to information item B, found on page 34 to 51. I will now call on Senior Manager Dervla Kelly to present the information item.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So in accordance with the board's bylaws and to ensure good governance, staff maintain a detailed record of all motions which are proposed at board and standing committees throughout the year. We include information such as the date, the subject matter, the exact wording of the motion, and the outcome. So if you see on page 37, we have the full record of all motions of a material nature for the period of November 20th, 2023 to November 4th, 2024. And this report is provided to the Governance and Policy Committee for information, but we are also happy to take any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions or comments? Thank you, Senior Manager Kelly. We are actually going to return to information item A. My apologies, I did miss a section there. So we are back on information item A, bylaws and public question period.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Miller. So the report on public question period can be found at page 22 of your agenda package. The issue that was discussed at the prior meeting can be found at the bottom of page 22, section 3. There was a statement regarding the defined right to public participation. So I wasn't exactly sure what that was referring to, but in any event, we looked at, of course, Bill 98 and PPM 170. And also covered the various ways that the board does engage so that the committee has a understanding of that. The PPM 170 does include the details for public engagement and for the parents raising concerns. In reviewing this memo in preparation for tonight, it was brought to my attention, and I confirm that it's correct, that our procedure is lacking specificity and some terms regarding the timelines for responses to parents, etc. So I've spoken to the director. We're in the process of revising that to make sure that we're compliant, and we'll obviously come back to this committee on those issues with our procedure once it goes through Administrative Council, and then this committee can decide at that. I would suggest at that time the committee could decide if there's a policy gap that the committee should be filling in terms of the issues covered in PPM 170 regarding parent information and parent concerns. So I just wanted to close that loop so that the parent concern issues will be covered through the protocol, but recognizing that there are deficiencies in that. But rest assured that through this committee, through the director and through this committee, we will address those. But our submission to the committee, staff's position to the committee is that that really is a separate process dealing with specific parental concerns around their pupils' engagement and success at school. And that wouldn't be part of what would be public question period at a board meeting anyway. So it's really a separate tract, but we'd include it in here just because these are updates in terms of parent information and parent engagement. But that particular piece on PPM 170 would be dealt with at there's processes for dealing with that at school level and some timelines associated with that, and we do have some cleanup to do. But otherwise, we've reiterated the opportunities for meaningful public participation that was contained in our prior reports. So we're back. Really, it's for the committee to discuss again, I think, the committee's views, whether they're looking for more reports or what direction they want to go in regarding public question period in our bylaws. So that's really, it's back to the committee for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter. Are there any questions or comments for discussion? Trustee Piniello?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thank you for preparing this report. I want to, not to change the subject, but in connection to this and in hopes that it can perhaps be added to an appropriate agenda in future, bring up again the exploration of trustees' ability to facilitate issue-based town halls within our communities as a means of garnering public feedback and engaging with parents, students, community members. I know that other boards, particularly Toronto District School Board, facilitates these, and their trustees have the ability to do so. And I recognize that that is a different board with different capacities and different, slightly different structure. But I wonder if it would be valuable in the eyes of other trustees here for us to further discuss and explore what that could look like, because I do think for some of the common questions that we get repeatedly about just misunderstandings or wanting to ask questions, a town hall type environment where we are discussing, you know, particular subjects at a time to clarify are really beneficial. And I say that as a trustee sitting here, that when we had questions about budget, we got to do an intensive, you know, session where we just got to discuss budget and ask all of our questions and get clarification. And so I would like to offer the same type of environment for parents, staff, families, community members who may also have similar types of questions and just want the opportunity to sit and talk and ask staff and trustees for clarification. So I pose that for consideration for a future agenda, just because I think as we discuss this and as, you know, the idea of question period existing or not existing is raised, I think ultimately what I've heard from community who were concerned about question period being erased was, what are our other avenues, because there are barriers to, you know, emailing a concern and not knowing when you're going to get a response. So regardless, I wanted to raise that for consideration. Thank you.
If I may, Chair Miller, and through you, just to flesh out for your consideration, some considerations the committee might make in relation to Trustees Piniello's suggestion. I think the first is that something that the committee would be looking for staff support or not? And if it would be staff support, then I think the starting point would be, you know, can the director provide the requisite resources, staff, and space? So that would be, I think, one piece of it, if it was going to be sort of a staff-supported event. Second thing is, if it is going to be a staff-supported, i.e. official DDSB event, what processes and protocols would be necessary to protect attendees at the meeting from potentially defamatory comments, personal attacks? So they'd have to be vetted, not unlike our like an open dialogue with staff present is problematic. And if it's going to be public and live streamed, what does that look like? And how does that control? So I think that's one piece. If it's a staff-supported DDSB event, there's a whole bunch of considerations that would go in that. And if it's not, if it's a trustee sort of individual effort, what does that look like? So I think there's the two streams, and to figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. And if it's a DDSB staff-supported thing, I think it's a dialogue at some way, whether it's a report but dialogue with the director in terms of what that might look like.
Thank you, Council Cotter. I'll now take comment or question from Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I definitely support a public question period, but I do think we need to reiterate the purpose of a public question period. We want parents and the public to come forward with questions, seeking information. We do need to point out that it's not a stance for people to come forward with their own messaging. If you have a question, we're pleased to answer, but don't come forward to make your own statement. I think we need to reiterate that fact.
Thank you, Trustee Morton. I'll turn it to Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm standing behind Trustee Morton and Trustee Pinello on the Town Hall thing. I think the simple question is maybe ask Toronto District School Board other trustees, how do they do it? And then we'll basically get the answer. So I feel like instead of putting up those barriers, there's a few of us around this table that has those contacts. So I feel that that would be an easy ask. So that's one thing. And I also want to reiterate, and listening to you, Trustee Morton, is that what I noticed about Toronto District School Board is that it was on specific subjects. It wasn't a free-for-all. People still have to submit questions. And then if there's time at the end, then it's questions and from the audience as such. So I think there's ways and there can be controls put in place. I just think it's unfortunate that our experience has not been that, but we can hope going forward that maybe we can make that our DDSB experience.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. And, I agree that when we put this together and we talked about and some of the comments I made around why this report was needed is to ensure that we have processes that gather input. Gather input for you and the ways parents can provide their concerns and so forth around education for their student within the school system. The only thing that and even though it's an aside, PPM 170 does put in some guidelines, as mentioned, where this is where the transparency, the expectation to respond back. And I know PPM 170 only really refers to staff, but I think that, from our perspective as trustees, we should also have that guideline, adopt a guideline as far as what our requirements are back to, for good governance sake, back to respondents, which is missing, because one of the things we said is communication. We also said one of the issues was the website. Where is the website? Because the website is lacking the information in a friendly manner for it to be, transparent and to be accessible to a variety of people. So, again, we are moving on those things. We have improved some of this stuff, but is it to the point where we can remove public question period, where people feel comfortable that they're being addressed in other ways? by having the standard that we talked about from PPM 170 is questions should be addressed. Those questions should be addressed, and the comment Trustee Pinello made was around parents, you know, feeling that they aren't being heard. Well, if we have that process in place where these are the standards, this is what expected, then that complaint can come through whoever that they're not being addressed, and we can monitor and track that, or the director can monitor and track that, whatever process that they have in place around communications. So communications is really key, and so we are moving on things, but there are certain key elements that I think that really need to move forward first in order to ensure that we have that basic information available out in the public. I still get lots of questions around enrollment, beginning of the year. How do I enroll, especially during the summer? They don't know how to access the stuff. It's better this year. It's much better this year. Things have improved. I'm not saying they haven't. But again, there are some basic questions that are still not being addressed from there that people are coming here. The linking of documents to ensuring that all our policies have the appropriate appendices and procedures, because it does say in PPM 170 that it's not only addressing the answer, but providing all the information that is available to support the answer in relation to that answer as well. So I think that that's really key in addressing it. I'm not sure I'm 100% at this point ready to eliminate it. I think it should be eliminated eventually, but I'm still not 100% sure if we're at the threshold where we should eliminate it. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. I do have a comment and I would like to share. So I'm going to ask if I could have a vice chair to switch with me so I could make my commentary and just to chair for the moment. Thank you. And through you, Chair, I just wanted to add an important comment to continue off of the point that was raised by Trustee Edwards. I do see the value in having the opportunity for the community and our parents to provide questioning. However, I do believe that the board is able to take stances in areas where the value of the board is being considered. So in that regard, when it comes to questions that we have received that have been viewed as contrary or outside of our policies, my commentary and suggestion here is, continuing from what Donna had shared, is if we could create some language or an accountability piece in there that refers questioners to our policies, and that should be upfront. It should not happen after the fact or after there is an issue to report that this is the reason why their question was not considered. However, it should also be included that this is the guides for the type of questions, and that should be clear so that they will be clearly referred to the policy. There shouldn't be a discrepancy, on what type of question is appropriate, because it would be clear in that procedure that they can refer to our aligning policies. So that is my thought. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm going to continue our discussion. So if I have any more commentary or questions on this. Any more questions or comments? Trustee Arce.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think we're all saying similar things. I was just wondering if it's possible whether or not that someone can create sort of a framework for us if we were going to do said town hall, or we're going to address the parents and the public, something that's a little bit, some kind of format for us so they can, so we can have the questions, so we can answer the questions, and so everything has a certain, similar to this flow chart, actually, to all of our flow charts. Everybody knows what's to come, like what questions are going to be asked, who's going to answer, you know, they're going to be able to, we will be able to respond. Some type of framework needs to be made so that they understand what the parameters are, and so we can go ahead and assist them.
Thank you, Trustee Arsenault. Any further comments? Okay. All right, we have Trustee Pinello.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, through you. Just building off of what Trustee Arsenault said, I wonder if, based on Council Cotter's feedback, it's worth sort of roughly skeletoning out the two different avenues. One where if trustees are facilitating sort of independently, and one if there's a staff component and what that would look like and whether it would be plausible, just so that if it's being built out one time, you can sort of look at both pathways, and then trustees can consider both and decide what most aligns with our vision for what this could look like. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Williams-Taylor, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do know that a number of districts do have similar kinds of structures, and I think that one trustee has already tabled the notion of doing an investigation to understand what those look like. I do know that some districts do have what they call a town hall, or is being defined as a town hall, but when you look at the definitions, they're called things like ward meetings, super councils. There's another term in Ottawa where there are a variety of different structures that are undertaken. So that, I think, is the first step, is to understand how these structures look elsewhere and what the nature of the involvement looks like. The other piece of it is a question as to how it is that staff partnership would work, because what I did hear was that there would be a public engagement that allows staff to respond to the questions. As a director, I have a responsibility to ensuring the safety of the staff, and so there is a question about what kind of structure does that look like in terms of ensuring that the public need is met, but the requirement and responsibility for safety is also met. So there are a number of questions to be answered. I don't know that a framework without examples at this particular time would be useful. I do think that there's certainly room for trustees to give direction to the staff to undertake to provide some feedback and some research as to what possibilities exist and how is it that public engagement is undertaken across the province and other districts, perhaps district like ours, to bring back to this table, and then that's where direction and conversation could happen that might be fruitful and directive.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Seeing as there is no further comments, I will move to the next item on our agenda, which is other business. Is there any other business of the board? We have no other business. I would now like to call the vote to adjourn this meeting. All in favor? Thank you. This meeting is officially adjourned. Just a reminder before we leave, there is another meeting. We will have our public special board meeting. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome. I will now call this special board meeting of December 11th, 2024 to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Islands First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewa of Georgina Islands First Nations. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest at this time. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as distributed? Thank you, Trustee Miller. Thank you, Trustee Jacula. All in favour? The agenda is approved as distributed. We will move to recommended actions. We now move to the recommendation from the Governance and Policy Committee. Trustee Miller, as chair of the committee, will please introduce this item.
Through you, Chair Brown, earlier this evening, the Governance and Policy Committee met to consider proposed amendments to the board member code of conduct, specifically to the complaints protocol, and I am bringing forward this recommendation from the Governance and Policy Committee. I move that the revised complaints protocol, as approved, be adopted.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. Is there a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Trustee Morton. Is there any discussion? Trustee Edwards.
Just a comment in support of the motion again, just to reiterate that these changes to the code of conduct were required under the new regulation and to conform to that new regulation. So just in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, are we all in favour? Thank you. That motion is approved. We have one information item this evening, the annual trustee attendance record for the period of December 4th, 2023 to November 4th, 2024. Are there any questions from trustees? Thank you. Seeing none, there is no further business. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting? Trustee Arsenal and Trustee Edwards. All in favour? This meeting is now adjourned.